Good morning, everyone. Boy, what a beautiful day in Noblesville. It is Monday, the 28th day of August. My gosh, Kristen Boice, where did August go?
It went
Hard
so fast.
to believe it. It did go by fast. You are tuned into another edition of Mental Health Monday here on a beautiful Monday in the city of Noblesville. We know that we have viewers from all over the world, which is still hard to believe sometimes when we say it. So I hope it's beautiful wherever you are tuning in for today. I'm Mayor Chris Jenson, mayor of my hometown of Noblesville, Indiana, joined by a good friend of mine and someone who has selflessly given of her time to this cause, the owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling, Kristen Boice. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jenson. I'm happy to be here today and with everybody tuning in.
This is awesome. Well, we, like I said, just genuinely appreciate you. I was just telling somebody in my office who was meeting here this morning, they were asking about Mental Health Monday. And I was like, it's hard to believe we're at 3.5 years in. You are the one who pitched that idea to me in April of 2020 during COVID and said, hey, you want to go online and do a therapy session on what people are faced with. And I still tell people that was probably one of the most anxious times, even, not just the time during COVID, but to be asked that question. And I knew the right answer was yes. But there was also a part of me like, do I want to go talk about my feelings? So I am just forever indebted to you for pushing me along that path. So thank you for joining us again on this. So we're going to tackle, speaking of anxieties, we're going to talk a little bit today about anxiety. Actually, we're probably going to talk a lot about anxiety because there's a lot of it in and around and all amongst us in today's society. But then we're also going to, if we have some time, get to some myths on parenting, one of my favorite topics. I was telling Kristen I was at dad camp this weekend with Vivian and had a lot of conversations around parenting, which is great. So hopefully I'll have something halfway coherent to offer to the conversation as you lead us through it. But before we do anything, we always need to focus on our breathing. So I'm going to let you walk us through a little square breathing exercise.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Jenson. And I love you did camp with your kids, dad camp. That is amazing. And one-on-one time. So just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
And that is priceless. So, okay, when you're anxious, when you're having a hard day, when you feel overwhelmed, when your thoughts are looping and you can't get off the rabbit wheel and you just need to kind of recenter, this is the first step that I work with clients to do is focus on centering into your breath. So we're going to feel our feet on the floor. We're going to take 2 deep breaths. We're going to inhale for 4 through our nose, hold for 4, and then slowly exhale like we're cooling soup out of our mouths. Why are we doing that? We're doing that to reset the autonomic nervous system to go into more calm, centered, clear state. So let's do 2 breaths together, pressing into your feet, a deep inhale through your nose. And release slowly out your mouth. Just kind of stretching, connecting to your nervous system, connecting to your body, feeling your feet on the floor. Let's do one more. Deep inhale through your nose. And release. Just notice the difference in how you feel. Notice the difference in your body. And you can always go back to the breath and just focus on breathing in. And sometimes I say the word in and breathing out. You can say the word out. And what that does is it refocuses your brain into the here and now instead of the past or the future.
Yeah. And again, I always say this sounds so simple and so basic. We have to breathe in order to live. But it's the difference between are we just living or are we really intentionally refilling ourselves back up with oxygen that we need to really make conscious thoughts and decisions. I say it's one of the best things I can do as a parent is to teach my kids about that. And we've tried at home to get our kids to take a deep breath by modeling that in our household. So it is a wonderful thing. I do it all the time when I'm in the car or if I'm in a contentious conversation, which happens occasionally in everyone's life. So I'm a huge fan of it. So again, all right, we're going to dive into a topic of anxiety. And I think you kind of touched on it with the central nervous system there, because I want to ask a little bit, how does anxiety present itself? Hopefully there may be a few people on here today that are like, you know what? I don't know if I have anxiety. I'm not sure if I've ever felt what anxiety is. There's a lot of conversation around it today, but what does it look like? So we can touch on that and then we can go from there. But I also want to say if anyone has any questions today or comments, just wants to say hi, let us know that you're watching. You're welcome to type those in the chat too. If you have any questions, we'll get it to them hopefully on the fly. If not, we'll get back to you with you later. But this is meant to be for you. So feel free to chime in at any point in time. If you have thoughts around anxiety or thoughts about breathing techniques, let us know. We want to hear from you. So with that, Kristen, we'll dive into anxiety. Do you want to touch a little bit about what that looks like and maybe how it presents itself in folks? But I'll let you drive from there. So
Yes. Here's the first thing I want to say about anxiety is everybody has a little bit of it and it's varying degrees. So I think of things on a continuum. How much is it impacting your life? Are you able to function, go to work, or is it shutting you down? And so we want to assess everything again is we don't, it's not an all or nothing, black or white. There's variances and there's nuances and there's variations of it. And so the first thing is let's kind of get on the same page about what is anxiety exactly. So the definition of anxiety is a discomfort in your nervous system, a fear, kind of a you're almost it's like people will call it worrying. So that's another word for it is you're worrying, but typically you're going to notice some body symptoms. Now, this does not say that that's automatically what you notice. Most of us are kind of disconnected from our bodies. We're just going through our day. We're not really going, well, what is my body saying? But that's the first thing that I invite people to do because anxiety lives in the body. What does that mean? That may mean you might get tightness in your chest. That may mean your breath gets a little bit shallower, or you're having trouble getting a deep breath. That's a panic attack. People associate, I can't breathe with a panic attack. It might feel tension in your jaw, like you're kind of bracing, or your shoulders might be really tight because you're kind of bracing for something bad to happen. And you're kind of always anticipating worst case scenarios. It might be rooted in the past, some trauma. It might not even be relevant to the present moment, but your body's reacting as if it is something happening in the present moment, but it's really rooted in the past. And recently, we're learning this is very interesting and something to open your mind and heart to that anxiety can be rooted in grief. And this is something new that we're talking about now is it can be rooted in unprocessed emotions from the past. And so we don't recognize that. It's not a cognitive thought like, oh, I'm having some unprocessed grief because I'm anxious. Typically, we can have some sadness that never got processed. So it's living in the body. We can also have some tension in the body. And so the first thing we're really looking at now is there, yes.
Sorry, I'm going to say real quick on that grief question because I'm curious. Is that all rooted from past grief, or is there anxiety built in existing grief that maybe you're going through right now?
Could be both.
Okay.
So it could be either or both.
Okay.
So it could be you're presently working through a grief, but we're not really connected to the sadness. So one of the invitations now we're learning is when you feel anxious to ask yourself, am I sad? And the answer might be like, well, I don't know. I don't really feel sad. What are you feeling in your body? Where are you noticing that in your body? Is there something from the past that you never fully got to grieve or process or even acknowledge? You just had to go on. Maybe you just had to move on. Maybe it was a survival state that you didn't even know you were even sad. So this is new research, and it can be very eye-opening to people to learn really how in the world is anxiety connected to sadness or unprocessed grief. And that's a new thought. So just take a moment to try to digest that, because sometimes it's hard to wrap our heads around because we've always anticipated grief about the future. While that may be true, it doesn't mean an all or nothing, because I'm all about the gray. Oftentimes it can be about the future and wanting to know an outcome, wanting certainty. So let's say you really want your kid to make a sports team, or you want to guarantee your health is always going to be great. And so you have this kind of fear of something bad happening, something dreadful. And that can also be tied to maybe something that happened in your past that was really hard. It was something quote unquote bad. It was something unexpected. It was something that just kind of came out of the blue. So can be a connection to wanting that certainty to prevent something from like loss or death or something like that, something bad happening that can be tied to your past. So I'm trying to help you kind of connect the dots
Mhm.
on how does this all make sense that it could be connected to unprocessed grief. What are your thoughts? What is it? What are you noticing?
No, it was interesting to me because, like I said, I know a few people right now that are going through kind of some not opportunities, grief situations, if you will. And so, and again, in those moments of extreme grief, it's probably hard to dissect all these things. So I was just curious, is it as people kind of go through it, and if you're taking kind of an inventory of your anxiety, of like you're trying to figure out where it's rooted in, I think it's really interesting to fold that into the menu of options, if you will, of why you're anxious. But I was just trying to kind of delineate between the existing current grief and maybe unprocessed grief from the past. I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah. And I think in the present moment, the question is asking yourself first, hand over heart center, taking your deep breaths, kind of rooting yourself in the present moment, slowing things down. With anxiety, we speed things up because we want to keep moving. Maybe we want to keep busy. We're trying to prevent something bad from happening. We're trying to control a certain outcome because that feels so much better than if I just am sitting with things. But if I just sit with it and I go, okay, let me slow down. Let me ask myself, what am I afraid of? Because we know there's a lot of fear of something bad happening in anxiety. Do I feel sad? See if there's any part of you that feels sad. It doesn't mean have to be all of you that feels sad. There might be like a little 10% part that feels sad. That's okay. See if we can allow that to come to the surface. The other thing is getting pen and paper out. If you're like, I just feel like I'm stuck in a loop in my head, I can't get out of it. It's like I'm just looping on the same thing and I can't get that thought out of my head. Hand over the heart center, take a deep breath, put your pen on paper and just let the pen go. See what comes through. Ask yourself, do I feel sad? Does any part of me feel sad? What am I afraid of? What is it that I'm looking for? What is it that I'm needing? Sometimes that part is needing attention. That part is needing to be soothed because we're all looking for safety, soothing as children. This is key. Safety, soothing, security. And those are really important that we're looking for when we're anxious. We're looking for safety and reassurance. We want to be soothed. So, how do I soothe myself? I might phone a friend, might go to therapy. I might try to take my deep breaths, go for a walk, pet my dog or cat or whatever animal you have. And then, in looking for security, I'm going to then nurture those parts of myself that feel really scared by going, okay, let's slow things down. I might kind of try to reparent that part and say, okay, you're going to be okay. Let's take it 1 minute at a time. Anxiety wants to get ahead. It's like it's 20 feet down. Some people like, well, maybe I'll be alone for the rest of my life. And I'm like, okay, let's bring it back to this moment right here, right now. How are we going to handle it? How are we going to cope with it? So those are some of the key things: movement, writing, connecting to your emotions and processing. Notice where you feel it in your body, and it needs to come out. It needs to come out in a healthy way. Maybe it's going to therapy, talking to a friend, joining a support group. There's many ways to handle it, but we have to learn to process emotions, pain, fear, and hurts.
That's what I was going to ask. One thing that you've driven home in me the last couple of years was that anxiety lives in the body. I think about that quite a bit. For me, it's been exercise, and that's how I have been trying to process my anxiety. It's so mentally helpful for me. Can you talk a little bit more about what movement does, and what movement looks like in different people and how they go about processing that?
So movement one helps with serotonin production, helps with a little bit of dopamine, and it helps regulate your nervous system. Or actually, if you're walking, even walking is wonderful for your nervous system. Any type of movement is regulating. We call it bilateral stimulation. We're working with the right side of the body and the left side of the body, and we're like rhythmically When we're moving, we are rhythmically regulating the nervous system. So we're moving that tension up and out of the body so then we can have more clarity. One of the things, if we're not moving, we feel stuck. And I'm not saying move all the time. We're moving maybe 5-10 minutes a day in any way you're physically capable of doing. That helps the body go, okay, I'm going to reset it. I don't have to carry all this tension and tightness in my body. I can release it. And that is key when we're dealing with high anxiety. Movement can shift perspective. So I may be like, I can't get out of this. And then I go for a walk. And maybe I'm listening to a podcast, maybe I'm listening to the birds. I can all of a sudden have a new perspective, and I'm not in my shame story or my fear story. Like, I'm not good enough and everybody hates me and this is going to be horrible. And now I can go, okay, I can handle this. My window of tolerance has now expanded to actually deal with what's in front of me and handle my emotions. That's what movement can do. It creates a window, increases your window of tolerance to face and handle emotions and pain while moving and regulating your nervous system.
Yeah. So, I'm just trying to think of it from a lay person standpoint. If you're right now facing some anxiety, movement's a great way to help process that. But then after you've kind of maybe peeled some of the layers of the onion back, you've maybe identified what's maybe making you anxious. You started to feel your body, and what is it? Is it your heartbeat? Is it tingling, around your body? What are those nervous triggers that makes you realize that you have anxiety? What are further steps? Like, what are those next steps that look like beyond movement, beyond self-identification, to treat and work through? Because I think that's important too. We're not just treating, we're working through anxiety.
So the one thing is talking about it. And we say, okay, talk therapy can go so far. That's why we have to have the body involved. But talking about it, we didn't get to do that often as kids. We didn't have a safe place to go and say, hey, I'm feeling so anxious and I'm scared and I'm afraid I don't belong and no one likes me and I don't know where to sit at lunch and I have no friends and I don't even like myself. Like, this is the stuff that kids are carrying around. If they have a safe place to go, we know that their nervous system will begin to reset and re-regulate. So the key is, can I get it out? Can I process it with a safe person? Can I have an empathic witness to what I just shared, non-judgmental, compassionate? They're not trying to fix it. They're holding space. That can be really, really helpful, because as kids, we internalize a lot. And what we know about anxiety is it has to be shared, it doesn't have to be, but it can be very helpful to have a shared experience with someone where they're holding the space and just saying, oh my gosh, that's so hard. All of a sudden, the nervous system goes, because it feels safe, it feels seen, and it feels secure. And we often can do that with ourselves as adults to those scared parts. We can hold space for those scared parts through journaling and through writing. The other thing is, I always say, consult a doctor if it's out of control and you feel like I literally can't get a handle on it. Consult a therapist or a doctor to get an evaluation done and get additional support, because you don't want to feel like you're walking in this all alone, because that wants to take us into shame. And shame says, I'm not worthy. I don't matter. I'm worthless. I'm unlovable. And what we want to do is take that shame part and start pouring into it, nurturing it, offering it that witness that we really need in order to heal.
Yeah, like I said, I just think that is, I think, sharing your thoughts with somebody, and that's something that, I mentioned I went to dad camp this weekend with Viv, and part of that is to get not only just one-on-one time with a child, but also spend time with other dads. And I know it's the same with mom, and I mean, not the same with moms. There's a whole different set of issues, but I always go back to the phrase "misery loves company," which is not the right phrase to use in this example, but the preface of it relates. You will be amazed how everyone else is going through the same stuff you're going through. You know what I mean? And if you share that with folks, to hear them talk about their challenges or have people just hear you is so soothing, and so comforting, if you will.
It is. And having a good cry, there's something to be said. People are like, I hate it. I hate crying. I have an ugly cry. I go, people, once they start crying, I'm like, good, we're releasing,
Yeah.
we're processing. You don't have to cry, but a good cry helps reset the nervous system, helps get it all out. And when you're sharing with a friend and they're like, yeah, me too, you're like, we believe that there's something wrong with us, and we think everybody else has it together. Their kids look like they're perfect. They look like they're parenting out of a parenting magazine or movie. And come to find out, everybody's got stuff behind closed doors. So there's nothing better than going, I'm in a shame spiral. I just yelled at my kid. And they're like, oh my gosh, I totally get it. Me too. All of a sudden, we're starting to come out of the shame and that anxiety and into more of a sense of I'm not alone.
Yep. I love that. Let's transition for a second and talk a little bit. You touched on kids and anxiety. So let's flip a little bit and talk about some parenting. I don't know if you maybe want to touch on kids and anxiety a little bit longer and maybe how parents address that, but then also maybe fold into some myths on parenting too that you wanted to touch on. I think those are incredible topics.
Okay, let's dive into this because here's the key. When you're in anxiety, somebody trying to fix your anxiety doesn't work because you're like, can you just hear me? I just need someone to like hear and see me and understand what I'm saying instead of offering like, well, have you done this? Have you thought of that? Well, I've done this and I've done that. And you're like, well, now it's about you. And now I don't feel seen or heard. We do this with our children. I'm going to raise my hand because I'm not going to pretend that I have this all figured out because I am a human. You're a human. We're learning as we go. So the biggest myth that I've learned in parenting is our kids are not here to meet our needs. They're not here to make me feel like a good parent. They're not here to make me feel better and make me feel like, hey, you're rocking this parenting thing because there's no such thing. So that's the first thing. They're not here to be mini-me's, an extension of us. They're here to be their own sovereign being. And when they get anxious, a lot of times we take on their anxiety. It's just part of the connection we have with our kids. So if they come home and they're upset and they feel like no one likes them, my middle school self is like, oh my gosh, no one likes you. Me too. Oh, and I want to fix it. And I want to, because I don't want them to feel that way. I don't want them to feel anxious. I don't want them to feel shame. I want them to feel loved, and I want them to feel successful, and I want them to feel liked, and I want them to feel all the good. I don't want them to feel any of that sadness or anything like that. So I have to watch my own reaction to their anxiety. I have to watch my own reaction to their shame and their fear. If I jump in and be like, well, you could call, Susie, and Susie could sit with you at lunch. And I have just left. I've now tried to regulate myself through trying to fix it for them.
And if Susie doesn't want to sit with them at lunch, we've now created another layer.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
How much of our reactions as parents is rooted in our past experience?
I'm going to tell you a huge percentage.
Yes.
There's a great book, and if you have a pen and paper, please get this book. It's called Parenting from the Inside Out. Parenting from the Inside Out by Dr. Dan Siegel. Why am I recommending that book? Every time people ask me for parenting advice, I say start with that book because it starts with self-awareness. It starts with curiosity about your own past that might not have gotten processed, and everybody's got it. So there's no such thing that this applies to everybody that's working with kids, that's a parent, that's about to become a parent in any way. Please get this book. What it does is it helps you work through your own unprocessed emotions. And there will be tons of times where you think you've processed something, your kid's upset because they got left out because on social media, they see all their friends posting that they all got together and your kid's not invited. And all of a sudden and they're sad and upset. And now you feel like you are the same age as them and you're mad and you're like, oh, I'm going to tell those kids, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's an invitation for me. Even though I thought I already worked through that, it's another invitation to go, okay, I'm really over-identifying with the pain and the hurt of being left out. All I need to do is sit in it and hold the space. I can't fix it. That's the misnomer of parenting. If I would just do XYZ, then they'll never feel less than, they'll never have pain, they won't feel shame because I just did all my work, which is important, but you can't prevent them from experiencing those emotions. You can only sit with them, empathically witness it. This is the most important thing I can teach about parenting. And I'm telling you, it's the most important thing I can teach about parenting. Being so self-aware and then sitting with your kids in their pain makes me want to get weepy because that is what they need the absolute most. They don't need you to solve it. They don't need you to tell them 110 things, which I have to watch, I'm going to admit, on what they could do to feel better. It's sitting with them and listening and saying, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense that you feel sad. It's okay to let out that sadness. Oh, honey. Oh, sweetheart. I get it. This is just so painful. Quiet. Zip it. Zip it. And this is the hardest thing for me as a parent is just to zip it and sit with them. And those are the moments that their nervous system can reset then. We've soothed their nervous system. We've held the safe space and we've created a sense of connection and security because I didn't try to rescue them out of the feeling. So they didn't get to process the feeling because I rescued them from it. I'm like, well, it's not that bad. And you do have friends and people like you. And I think you're amazing. I think you're so handsome. I think you're beautiful. I think you're amazing at that sport. What I've done is I didn't let them process. I just try to rescue them out of the feeling.
And you say that about yourself too.
Yeah. This is the hardest work I've ever done.
Yeah.
It's so, because the first thing that wants to come out of my mouth is solutions. Mm-hmm. It is. I'm just like, well, I can rescue. I mean, I can help you feel better. And that's the misnomer. What helps people feel better is you just so in tune with them and so present in their pain. That is the key. But if I haven't dealt with my emotions, I can't offer that to my kid. If I haven't done my own work, I can't do it because I'm so uncomfortable with those feelings within myself. I can't tolerate those feelings within myself. So I'm not going to be able to tolerate that for my kid. That's huge.
Man. That's a big task right there. Because again, every parent wants to fix it. Every parent wants to fix it.
100%. I would be lying if we all were like, oh, I just sit with my kid and I never feel like I want to offer him a solution. It's a sham.
And are there different with different age groups, younger kids with anxiety and challenges, any other specific advices on maybe a different age group, maybe even like a younger child, more like a pre-elementary kid that's dealing with some anxiety? And that's going to be obviously be handled a little differently.
There are a ton of great books, but my number one suggestion for kids with anxiety is teach them about feelings. So get every feeling book you can buy. And Conscious Discipline by Dr. Becky Bailey. If you get on her website, consciousdiscipline.org, she has so many wonderful books on feelings and how to handle the feelings. So we learn coping skills on how to handle feelings and how to handle worries. So there are tons of books on how to handle worries. But my number one advice is you learn about your emotions. They learn about their emotions. And we talk, we name them where they are in the body. So I have a headache and I feel angry, or I feel disgusted because I don't really like, how this person treats me. We learn feelings at a very early age. So get all the books on feelings. You as a parent, meaning me, start swimming in the feelings world. Yes, our thoughts are important too. We have to notice our thoughts, but we skip that. We all have thoughts. Those are easy. It's the feelings that we're not processing and noticing them in the body. So that would be my number one recommendation on young kids.
Well, and I think the nice thing is if you are just modeling that, it's amazing how much of a sponge they are, and we'll pick up on that. I've learned that so much the last couple of years. So that is awesome. Well, Kristen Boice, we are out of time here, but I just want to thank you. That was a Awesome. And great dialogue here. I actually had a friend of mine, Amy Curtis, who's chiming in there, asked some questions about she has a new little baby who's really cute, by the way. And I actually have several friends that are having their first babies. So I think maybe we should do a show at some point in time about postpartum transitions,
Yes.
those type of things. So Amy suggested that. I think it's a great idea. Come up maybe this fall, we can talk a little bit about that. This was a great topic for those that were sending kids back to school. If you have a first-time middle schooler, that's awkward as heck. High schoolers, that's weird. College kids, I know there's a lot of parents that are struggling through that, probably more than their college kids actually are. So this is all incredible information. So thank you for going through this show. Thanks everyone for tuning in too. If you need immediate mental health, and I know this wasn't exactly timed up with our topic today, but if you are somebody in crisis, where do we turn, Kristen?
988. You can call or text 24/7. And please, if you feel like the world would be better off without you, or you're a burden to people, those are what shame stories tell us, or unprocessed trauma. They're simply not true. So please reach out, text any time of day, or call 988. It's the new 911 per se. When we have an emergency, 988, of course, 911 if you're in a high situation crisis, but 988 for mental health, any kind of mental health crisis. It is all clinicians they have trained clinicians answering the line. So that is a way to get immediate support.
It's awesome. And in the meantime, let's get moving. Let's write it out to get it out. Let's talk to our friends and neighbors, and let's check on one another. Kristen Boice, as always, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. And we'll see you back here next month for another edition of Mental Health Monday.
Thank you.